If I had $1 for every time a local asked me why I, let alone anyone else, would ever leave America, I'd be a millionaire. And that's even when I explained that between the events of the last few years and me having my daughter, I no longer see a future in America. It doesn't matter. I still get crazy looks. And I get it. Locals have seen the TV shows and watched the movies showing happy, smiling, rich Americans living the life. But that wasn't my reality. And that's despite having multiple degrees, working in mostly stable employment, and me trying my hardest to get ahead. Being abroad has also made me realize that the American way of life comes with how do I put this? Side effects. So while there are those who have chased the American dream and caught it, here are a few of my scars I realized I've gotten from living over 40 years in the States. For the longest time in America, I dreaded going to the doctors, let alone the hospital. Now, no one likes going to the doctors, I get it, but the whole experience left me feeling worse than anything that ailed me. I don't think I even realized how dehumanizing the entire process was until I was able to experience something else. I remember numerous times calling a doctor's office to make an appointment with them asking one and only one question: what insurance do you have? Then it would be followed up mostly by getting all the insurance details they could. Rarely was I asked about what trouble I was having or how bad the situation was. Nope. Figuring out how they would get paid was 90% of the conversation. It has been healing to go to a clinic or hospital abroad and have the concentration be on what's wrong and the payment only being addressed after receiving care. See, I'm old enough to remember when you would go to the emergency room writhing in pain only to be handed insurance paperwork. Oh yeah, it's only recently that hospitals in America stopped doing this. I guess you can call that some progress, but I really can't understand why we Americans put up with this year after year. And this loveliness was only the beginning. I was blessed to have premium health insurance as a teacher, in lieu of a higher salary. But great insurance didn't prevent me from having offices consistently question the benefits. So after seeing doctors who would rush through appointments or half listen to my concerns, 9 times out of 10, I would receive a bill. Now, depending on the amount, I would have 2 choices to make. 1, I could take hours on the phone questioning why something wasn't covered, and after playing telephone tag between the doctor's office and my insurance, someone would discover a coding mistake and maybe fix it. Or option 2, if it was a smaller amount, I would end up paying it regardless if it was covered, just so I didn't waste my time or be threatened by nasty medical billers to send it to collections. So I can't describe the feeling of relief going into a hotel-style hospital in Thailand, having a doctor not rush, address my concern, and walking out paying usually less than $100. No insurance needed. And that price includes the medicine. And the best part for me was knowing that I wouldn't get a surprise bill later on. And as much as I feel scarred from horrible medical experiences in America, I was lucky. I had insurance. I felt for the multiple people who I saw in Texas negotiating cash bills, calling family members for money right in the middle of the waiting room of urgent care. I'll never forget the despair on one woman's face because she had gotten an abnormal pap smear but couldn't afford the follow-up test. Another way the U.S. really messed me up has to do with housing. One of the open secrets in America is how safety, education, and access to necessities is all dictated by where you live. So affordable housing being in neighborhoods with great schools, accessible, reliable public transportation, and the conveniences of good grocery stores and pharmacies, well, that doesn't really exist. Closeness to all of these things come at a premium and are dictated by how much the homes cost in the neighborhood. Now, America isn't the only country to segregate neighborhoods by income, but communities in the States seem to have mastered the concept. Probably since this mess conveniently segregates races as well. This meant that for me, being a person who places high priorities on safety, security, and convenience, well, I was always pushing my budget to its limits when it came to housing. I was mostly a renter in America, which also came with its own set of insecurities. When I rented from a private owner, I was subject to unexplained changes at any time. For example, I'll never forget being in San Diego, 8 months pregnant, and my husband tearing his ACL, only to have our landlord decide not to renew our lease. And despite our situation, they refused to extend the lease as well. No explanation given. And this is despite making no complaints about us paying our rent every month, and leaving the property better than we found it. Oh, and to add insult to injury, we were rewarded for being such good tenants with a notice to vacate placed on our door. Not handed to us personally, not sent in the mail. No, scarlet letter style, taped to the front door. The alternative wasn't much better. Times that I rented with a management company, things were handled a little more professionally, but that came with a guarantee of one rent price the first year and at least a 20 to 30% rent hike the next. Yes, guaranteed. Just for contrast, when I signed my lease in Malaysia, although I rented from a private owner who used a property manager, similar to the San Diego situation, it was influenced by tenant protections. There, leases are standardized with a provision that says although you only sign a 1-year lease, the rent price is guaranteed for 2. That means the landlord can't play gotcha and raise the rent if you want to stay. Plus, there seems to be a higher level of decency. When I asked the property manager about the 2-year price freeze, he explained that when landlords have tenants who want to stay past the 2 years, the lease price rarely changes, with landlords appreciating having a stable renter. This also might have a lot to do with Malaysia, especially KL, having an abundance of housing at different price points, thus competition. The third way I realized I had scars left over from America was when I would be in large crowds abroad. Let's just say that after living in Texas, where it's routine to see someone putting away their protection, in their glove box before they go into a store, I had built up an aversion. And I can't blame this all on Texas culture. 5 years before moving, there was an incident at a mall around the corner from my house in Maryland. I remember how sick it was of me that when I heard about it, I thought it was lucky that only a few people lost their lives and only a handful of people were injured. See, it was a Saturday night and the place was packed. So only having a few victims was seen as dodging disaster. Oh, and again, I was paying a fortune in rent for the privilege of this experience. Like many Americans, I looked for exits at movies and was nervous attending festivals and concerts. I know it wasn't normal, but it was normalized. And this nonsense started when I was young. As a teacher, I remember the DC sniper targeting a school in a neighboring community, which meant that my 20-year-old something self would literally be running into the school building until he was caught. Not once have I had to worry about being a horrific victim since being abroad. Now, I use my head in public, but it just isn't an issue. The worst crime in most places I've been have been purse and phone thefts, and often these are done in a way where there's no confrontation. Basically, someone's putting down something and a criminal is picking it up. And I've lived in major cities, not out in the sticks or suburbs somewhere. When I think about how awesome it is to be out at night with my 4-year-old and not go into a panic that I stayed out past dark, I'm left speechless. Even now, talking about this makes me feel like there was something wrong with me. But I know multiple friends who have felt and experienced the same concerns when it came to safety in the States. The last way I realized that America messed me up was how happy I was to see people in community abroad. Now, this one may be unique to me, and I know that there are other Americans who have a completely different experience than mine. But one of the things I personally struggled with there was finding a community where I felt supported. Don't get me wrong, I experienced how wonderful people could be in America. But if I had to put it in percentages, it started to feel like an 80-20 split. I say that because too often, especially in my last years, I saw people being absolutely rude to each other. Or even worse, flat out ignoring their neighbors. It always saddened me to see homeless people eating from the trash and people would just walk on by. Or shoppers fighting with complete strangers in stores. At the time, I blamed it on the stress everyone was under. But after leaving during the same period and seeing Thai people smiling and helpful despite their own issues, I struggle not to judge. Especially when I can remember my very friendly toddler saying good morning to strangers in the States only to be ignored. But luckily, she's also seen something different. This might sound like an exaggeration, but I can't remember one time in Thailand where a hello wasn't met with a sawasdee ka. There also aren't streets full of homeless tents, and I've seen people go out of their way to be generous and kind to the few people obviously in dire need. So while no country is all bad or good, I felt out of place in the States. And although I thought about leaving many, many times, I was too scared to take the plunge. But better late than never, I finally said enough. I felt overly burdened by the nonsense and the corruption. I felt like the greed was out of control, and that most of the people around me were struggling either to meet their needs or keep them being met, which often didn't bring out the best in them. I wish a younger me had a video like this one. If so, I might have left sooner. So when people question why I named the channel American Escapee, it's simple. It's a reflection on how I feel.
Losing time, I'm fading fast. I just wanna make it last. Try to let go of the past. I close my eyes, embrace the blast.